Good afternoon. My name is Victor Brian, as you've heard. I'm going to lead into this session. I would first of all like to thank Mr. Karanja, Mr. David, and Mr. Duncan, Dr. Duncan, sorry. I think one of the things we need to learn about them is that, number one, we need to equip ourselves with knowledge, understanding, and above all, we need to go continuously learning new knowledge. Personally, I'm challenged by Dr. David, and I can promise him right now that in 2021, my name will no longer be Victor, but Dr. Victor. So, first of all, this session will be very interactive. So I would like each and every one of us who has a question to be very short, precise, and to the point because we are short of time. And I would like, first of all, to break the ice. Mr. David, I will start with you. So what should the Kenyan youth do to prevent violent extremism, spreading information from mass media channels such like Al-Qatur, and how the citizen participation can solve that? Mr. Duncan, also I would like you to share with us on how the African youth can enrich or advance the African rights and interests from Africa itself to the world, in terms of your point of the right to development. That's Bajul Charter. And also, Mr. Karanja, I would like you to also give us, shed some light, on how we can start from the grassroots level to the global level and overcome the negative notion surrounding the youth and policy. So with that, I would like the guests who are in the dais to quickly answer that in a short period of time so that we may get many speakers as we can to give questions to the dais. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, we will start with you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Me? Okay. Well, I think the most interesting part of this is to hear from you. How you as young people think that you can engage on preventing violent extremism. So I hope we can get some reflections around that. Last year, the UNDP, the United Nations Development Programme, made a huge report on the key factors behind radicalization. And if you haven't seen it, I really recommend that you go online and you search for the UNDP CVE report. It's very well presented, firstly, and the content is super interesting. And one of the key messages is that this is not rocket science. Yes, it's complex, but basically when young people don't have access to social, economic opportunities, if they don't have food, if they don't have drink, if they don't have health services, if they don't have stable homes, what do you expect? You know, young people have energy, they have hopes, they have dreams, they want to make a contribution to their community and for their own lives, right? So it's key that young people feel that they have the basic needs covered and that they feel appreciated and part of society. And with that comes, of course, appreciation of diversity and that everybody feels that they're part of this nation. And of course, young people can play a role in that, and engaging and contributing to these key factors being realized. And finally, on narratives, of course, developing narratives which are moderate and which contribute to quality of life for everybody, I think is key. But again, I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to the next panelist.
Okay. So my question, let me try answer it. The right to development is looking at development as liberty. You see, when we talk of liberty, we only think of political rights like to express yourself, the right to freedom of speech, but development is liberty because if you don't have resources, you don't have a choice. And it's a very bad condition. I don't think God meant life to be like that. So you can have all those rights, but if you don't have development or resources, they are impotent. And so there is an interconnection between the socio-cultural rights and the civil right. Most of the time, we are misled and we only focus on civil rights without seeing the connection between civil and social cultural rights. So you'll find youth are very excited about freedom of speech, which is very important, but probably not as excitable when it comes to the right to food, the right to shelter, the right to earn a livelihood, which all cascade to the same thing. Finally, there is an accusation that it is almost impossible. The world is becoming universal. There is nothing like Africa youth. Africa youth, after all, they are dressing like anybody else. They are talking like anybody else. They are listening to music from abroad, and they are not in tune to their culture. I think that is a false narrative in this sense. A lot of research has been conducted. And if you look at culture, not as the material culture, sometimes we look at culture as the ostrich feathers, the geriatric dances, walking with calabash. That is not culture. Culture, firstly, is about values. Young people also care about community. Young people also care about the extended family. Young people also care about respect and dignity. And so I think that right to development ties to liberty and freedom. And if we don't have development, then we can't really enjoy those other rights. Because human right is supposed to give you options and ability to do A or B. But if you have no ability, because you have no choice, you have no option, then your human rights are curtailed. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think young people need to begin to build a common consciousness about themselves. We need to begin to know who we are and to know that our identity as young people need not to be fluid. We need to be able to organize and to mobilize. We need to reposition ourselves in society strategically as emerging leaders, not as leaders of tomorrow. And we need to begin to engage with our older folk. We do not need to isolate ourselves in what is called the subculture of young people, which Dr. Ojwang has attempted to describe. We dress probably in a particular way. We listen to a particular kind of music. We speak in our own language. That tends to isolate everyone else, but it also tends to isolate us from everyone else. We need to begin to build bridges, generational bridges, and to begin to dialogue with our older folks much more, especially in relation to control over power, resources, and people, so that we can begin to have some real influence. We need to strive for more and to be seen to be responsible. Is the only way we can be trusted by our older folk who still wield power. And lastly, it may not be possible to have all that unless our older folks also begin to reach out to us and build appropriate governance context that will allow young people to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those were very short and precise answers. Now, I would like to remind the delegates that keep tweeting at Young YDK. Across all platforms, YDK is in Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So please, let's keep the conversation rolling. Now, I would like some few delegates to actually, I'd like to give them an opportunity so that they can ask questions in regard to the topic that they have addressed today. So do we have any? Thank you. I see 1, 2, 3. Thank you. We'll start with her. So please introduce yourself and then approach, ask the panelists, yeah?
Good afternoon. I'm JC Wali from Strathmore University, and I have a question for the dais. So earlier on, we had talked about unemployment, and now it's gotten to 39%. So as the youth, we're being encouraged, keep reading, get your papers, and look at the unemployment rate just keep going up. So what would you encourage us as the youth? Because there's definitely a big percentage of people that are losing hope in the job, let's say, arena. And like, we just want to know like what we're supposed to think or what we should look forward to in the future. Like, yeah, thank you.
Kindly forward your question to who? Who are you forwarding a question?
The dais. Yeah.
Next, yes, Jen.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mohammed. What is it called? I'm honored to be here in this educative conference. All thanks to the organizers. Basically, my question is matter of a concern in that we all are aware many government leaders, institutions, and key leaders usually view the youth and in a label way that they feel fear, insecure, and a threat. And in many cases, the young people are viewed or labeled as the drivers of conflict and creators of instability in the globe. So my question is, what are the mechanisms to end such narrations, and what special measures can be put in place to increase the participation and the empowerment of the youth? Thank you.
Last but not least, the lady at the back.
Evening. Good afternoon. My name is Hilda Marete, African Nazarene University. My question goes to Mr. Karanja. For example, in Kenya, we always say youths are being empowered, youths are getting jobs. For instance, in our judiciary, you will meet, we doesn't have a young, the one we can quote, a young lawyer. If you go there, you'll meet that they want someone who is experienced. Where will we get this experience? If it comes to job applications, you will come and get a job that qualifies you, but the last part says we need 5 years experience. We have not yet reached there. Where will we get this experience from? How can we tackle this out? Because the minute that we youths don't have job, it will lead us to still being vulnerable and obvious targets to the vices rather than to the virtues. How can we solve this? Thank you.
So the panel should, thank you for that. So the panel, please answer that questions. Thank you.
Let me try to. It's President Obama who gave a speech on being on the table. Or actually, yes, on the table. Is it on or at? No, those.
You choose.
You
choose.
Yeah. English came on a ship. It's being at the table. Because being on the table, I envision is sitting on it. And he was saying that until you sit at the table, your issues are not being dealt with. And the goal should be that you need to be where? At the table. And that is true. From Norway, the experience and even the experience we were getting, our parties, youths are used as security or to help people out to park when there's a big rally. And so youth wing, usually, one way or the other, they're also conditioned to think of themselves as such. That for youth, our job for the party is to offer what? Security. So are you at the table when the issues are being discussed? Or you are out there waiting to be given 50 shillings because the youth are being muscular and strong? Your job is to offer security. Finally, I think that you are right. Without money, you have no voice. And that's why I'm saying right to development become very relevant to the youth. How come it's only the youth money being eaten in Kenya? We don't see geriatrics money being taken. The old people are still getting their money, but every time there is NYS. So somebody is eating in the name of youth. How many youth have we seen that are angry to an extent that we see youth in the street saying, not in our names? Every time NYS, NYS, then you keep telling us we are not employed, we are not employable, we need experience, but then you eat on our behalf. And eat in a very bad way that we even eat the plates. So I think we are still waiting for politicians to mobilize us. For the politicians to tell us, youth, now come out and have a march about your funds. It will probably not happen. We need to understand and take care of our territory, because politicians will always take advantage if we are not at the table. We will always be used. And finally, on the issue of labeling, we are told that stereotype, the way stereotype work, you take the most negative experience, you turn it around to make it the norm, and then you spread it as what represent those people. So youth have been stigmatized, youth have been stereotyped, but youth have probably not have a place on the table, and they need to demand. Nobody will give you a space until you demand that, no, if we are youth in this party, we are not your security, hire your security. We are also coming because we have ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ojwang. You mentioned something that not in our name, which reminded me of my activism years, and we used to say nothing about us without us. That we should not allow anything that touches or that has implication on us, anything that is going to affect us one way or another, to go on without our contribution. We must be heard, and we must demand and create the space or the civic space, look for civic knowledge, and engage with whoever has to hear and to listen to us. I also want to respond to Hilda. You asked how it is that young people can be able to acquire the experience that they need to make an entry into the job market. From my experience and sitting where I do as the executive director at the Social Welfare Development Program, and having worked with many other organizations, including being hired to hire other people for other organizations, I've seen one thing that I would want to share with you. That oftentimes what you need as a young person is minimal skills to be able to make an entry into the job market. You have your degree, you have your diploma, you have your education, but then the employer will still ask, have you ever had any any experience? Have you worked anywhere else before? And oftentimes we tend to think that we don't have that, and maybe there are no opportunities. And most people will ask, because I hear this every day, where will I gain this experience if you don't give me the first opportunity to? It is true, and that is a valid question. And I get confronted with that oftentimes. But the one thing I have seen with myself, and this is what I did, I took up a volunteer opportunity for 7 years, volunteering for the government of Kenya as a children officer, a volunteer children officer, VCO. For 7 years, I used to go to an office and serve this country without a pay, and I would use my own transport. At the end of my volunteer experience, I had been able to publish a 150-page report that I shared with everyone else in Kenya who cared, including the head of civil service, about the status. Then he was Francis Mudhaura, about the state and the status of our children with regard to protection, participation, and I can't remember what was the other thing. And that sold me. It sold me. And wherever that report went, it created a name for me. So what I'm trying to say is that there are a lot of volunteer opportunities. We can engage. And oftentimes a lot of organizations, including where I work, have come up with policies that we are no longer going to hire someone who has not volunteered anywhere. You must be capable of giving. Because again, the motivation for looking for a job is oftentimes to earn and not to impact the world. It's oftentimes to earn. The reason why we feel hopeless, helpless, powerless is because we do not have the money, but we have the education. And we don't find the education to be useful in creating opportunities for us to be able, our spaces, defining our own spaces. I'm seeing a lot of young people who are making do with whatever it is that they have. Coming up with innovations from their homes, using mobile phones, the gadgets they have, the most accessible internet is almost everywhere, Wi-Fi. Guys are coming up with a lot of things. Google now has a Google Challenge for innovation. It's running now up to July. You can come up with whatever innovation, you can showcase it there. You know, when you're a soldier, you don't say we lost the battle because we didn't have this or that weapon, or the other side came up with much more stronger weapons. You learn to fight with what you have. And young people, the one thing that we have the time. We have the time to make mistakes. We have the time to try and make mistakes. And we still have the time to correct. You know, those of the older folks don't have the time. And time is the greatest resource you can ever have in this world. Coupled with the education you have, trust me, young people in all these things that are called Nile Hub. I went to school with Sami Gishuru. Sami Gishuru, who knows Sami Gishuru? He was there during Obama. I saw him seated next to Obama. He was making one of those speeches. He was my classmate in primary school, in one of the primary schools that don't have a name. You know, the one you don't want to pronounce somewhere. And Sami Gishuru does not have a degree from any university. He does not have any post-secondary education. Sami Gishuru right now is one of the most celebrated innovators in this country. Wherever he goes, he's respected. Oftentimes, I think we underrate ourselves as young people, and we tend to look to the government too much when we have it in ourselves. We can make it. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to add on to what the others have said and support that fully. And I think, you know, it all boils down to yourself. You know, for some people it will work splendidly to do volunteer work. For other people it will work wonderfully to be an entrepreneur. You know yourself what gifts you have and what you can achieve and what you can contribute. And if you are passionate about it, and if you have a vision and a dream, then I think life will show you opportunities, but you have to work hard for it and explore and then see what one step brings you forward in terms of new opportunities. And as we were taught at university, you probably won't get your dream job at the first try. And for me, that was certainly true. I had to apply for hundreds of jobs and, you know, go through a path which I had never envisioned, which was fantastic for me. And I think that goes for everybody. You have to find your path and use the opportunities that come along. And someone was asking a question here about international mechanisms for involving youth. Well, as I mentioned earlier, there's this international network called the Youth Civic Activism Network, Youth Can. And that's just one example of many international networks which exist. And often, the civil society groups nationally or locally are part of international movements. So that's also a way one can engage. For example, we supported an organization called IMLU, the Independent Medical Legal Unit, that combats police brutality. And they are now, they're quite a small organization, but they've existed for many years and done incredible work. They are now representing the whole of civil society in Kenya in the East African community. So it is possible, even for small organizations, to play that big international role also when it comes to peace. And I think for all these issues, when it comes to having an impact, it all boils down to coordination and organization. When you are together like this, you are stronger. And you just look at the labor movement, you know, the trade unions, what they have achieved around the world. Look what your civil society and civil groups in Kenya have achieved in terms of your constitution. It doesn't come for free, usually. One has to work for it together. And I think that is really key, so keep it up.
May I just add that one of those other mechanisms is the Africa Youth Charter. The Africa Youth Charter is a mechanism that actually is there with the Africa Union. And the Africa Charter was adopted in 2006, and Kenya is one of those countries that have ratified it. And it obligates the states to take certain measures to create the space and to promote the young people's rights. And therefore, we also need to look at that particular mechanism. So although I know that there lacks an enforcement mechanism in the country and within the region, but nonetheless, we also need to look at that and look to the ways of engaging through that mechanism.
Thank you very much. I hope you have learned a lot about it. And I would also like to note something. For all the delegates, I think you need to be very, very, very profound in terms of the Public Participation Act 2012. You also need to be aware about the Public Management Act 2012. And also you need to read about the Internship Act 2015, whereby now this is going to protect you when you're going to the job market. You also need to volunteer. There are a couple of companies and organizations in Kenya. One, as he has mentioned, there is also call for volunteers. There is one that is doing an ad on social media. I think some of you have seen it. And if you like to know about volunteering, please approach one of the delegates or officials of YDK so that they can give you a very good insight so that you can develop quite a resume. Now, before we close, I'd like to give each panelist at least 30 seconds before we close. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I think it is important for young people to build a community of like-minded, and that is the concerted effort that will give you a voice. As you are looking at the economy and even the percentage of unemployment, it is real, it is scary. But if you have a community of interested people or people who are lobbying for the same thing, you can have a voice. There is a little cynicism among politicians when they are saying, you go be innovative there. It's like you are disturbing us. Jiajiri huko bwana. Yet him is an old man, but you came to people. He looked for unemployment by running as an MP, and is now in parliament, but he's telling these young people who only has a degree that you go and make your own employment there. So let us also be aware of that cynicism, because sometimes I think that word has been used, and as a group of youth, you need to interrogate the sincerity, because a lot of people, Professor Nyong'o is a professor with I don't know how many degrees. He didn't employ himself. He decided to run for governor, and we as the people did what? Employ him. So also mark when that word is used with cynicism of almost you are disturbing me, go there and employ yourself. Say, no, but Mheshimiwa, why didn't you do it? How come you ran for MP and we employed you? Thank you.
I would just like to reinforce what was said earlier about the use of public funds, because at the end of the day, certainly as Norway, one of our key priorities in Kenya is to promote trade and business, right? And we have some heavy investments in Kenya already through our Sovereign Wealth Fund and through Norfund. It's the investments which will really create the huge number of jobs which the country needs. But the reality is that investors don't come to Kenya if they don't think there is rule of law here, or if they know that the cost of investing in Kenya instead of in India or in Argentina is going to be much higher because of corruption. So someone was mentioning the SDG number 16, right, on good governance. If good governance really becomes entrenched and implemented, and one can manage resources in a transparent and accountable way, money follows the rule of law. The investors will come in and you will have those jobs, and it will be much, much easier to get an internship, it will be much easier to get a job. So I think youth can also play a role in making that happen.
They say your net worth is your network. My deputy county commissioner, where I stay, recently told me that in about 15 years from now, government and the UN and any agency you can think about will be full of people who are currently at your age. And I would say the same thing. In about 20 years from today, any government entity you can think about, any UN, including all these embassies that we have all over, will have a lot of you. Because whether we like it or not, naturally, we will also take over. So what we need to do now is to begin to position ourselves correctly, is to begin to identify the strategic positions that we need to take and to occupy, is to begin to acquire the knowledge and the skills and to be properly networked so that when that time comes, we will not be left behind. We took the first measure, the first step, we came here, and that defines us differently. Many other young people did not find the opportunity to come here today. And so those of you who are here and who will benefit from the information that you've been able to gather, we pray to God and wish you all the very best that in the next 20 years, you'll be somewhere. Thank you.